Thank you out there in cyberspace around the world for tuning into this time to talk about the Exodus. And I was thinking about, you said, well, I'm going to do a teaching. Well, a lot of things that I've decided was just to do a sharing, just to basically share how I got to this point and give context. And I think that David Rohl earlier today has helped to explain context with some of the stuff that he's taught us already. And one of the things that I became aware of through this, I want to give you a little bit of background that I started to understand when we talked about this testimony. In fact, you've got this Bible here, and it's divided into two books, right? The Old Testament and New Testament. And this word testament, what does that word mean? We shared just a little bit. It's a testimony. And I think that if we look at the books, the book of Revelation, it's a testimony. All these different books are testimonies of what happened, the Gospels. They're testimonies. And so I'm going to share with you a little bit of my testimony in the sense that what happened to me, how this, I'm going to give you a little bit. People have asked me sometimes, I haven't shared much publicly, well, how in the world did you get involved with all this? This seems like such a big undertaking and going off, and I'm going to tell you just a few stories about how it happened and how we moved forward. And like I said in the very beginning, I was just on a bit of an adventure. I think that guys want to go on adventures. I mean, have you ever looked, how many guys actually look at maps, and when you look at a map, especially when I look at an ancient map, I go, I wonder what that river is like. I wonder what that mountain would be like. And I just love maps, because when you're a kid, it's like buried treasure, all sorts of stuff that's out there like that. And as I started to meet with people and talk about these things, and they talked about going to Egypt and going into tombs or temples, I mean, that's all Raiders of the Lost Ark kind of fun, right? I mean, it just seems like a really cool adventure to go on. And that's what drew me in the beginning to want to go and look for this material. The other thing that happened was that I started to look at the Bible. I mean, I would read these passages, and I was trying to put pieces together. And what I'd like to share with the audience is that, I didn't feel, I'll have to be honest with you, when I was growing up, because I was in this broken home, I'll just call it what it was. And when you're a kid, you're so embarrassed about the fact that I didn't have a dad around, and that we were actually on welfare. And it was difficult. And my mom would go to the grocery store, and I was a carryout at the grocery store. And we got food stamps. And, it was hard. And I remember saying, my mom would be like, she'd try not to buy food when I was there. It was a difficult time. And you're thinking about that dependency that we had upon, God and sort of helping us through these difficult times. And I was thinking about, my background and what drew me into searching for this story, because once again, my mother, I know your mother's right over here, Michael, our parents have a legacy that they give to us. And my mother had this legacy of faith that she gave to me and gave to our family. And so this idea of going on an adventure and searching for the legacy of the Bible was really, I thought, it met my manly guy thing, and it met my family legacy thing. And so when I went on that adventure, that's really what it was an adventure. And it was right after 9/11, as we talked about, that I went to Egypt the first time. And I went with Dr. Moeller, and we went to the Sinai, and we went to all these different crossing locations as we were looking for this. We went to Nuweiba, and there were people diving there. So I didn't know anything about anything. I mean, honestly, I just knew the basics of the story. And then over time, what ended up happening was I started reading more and more, and I started looking. I mean, this sounds crazy, but I didn't know that the book of Deuteronomy was connected to the book of Exodus. I mean, I was just thinking Exodus was the main thing. Oh, I know David is just going like, Tim, how could you not know that? But I'm confessing it publicly here. I mean, I'll just tell you that I think a lot of us, and what's very funny in a sad way, is that when I started filming scholars and even people that were ministers or different people who were at colleges or whatever, I would have to correct them on the story because they didn't know the details of the story. And you started to realize that, wait a minute, I'd have to, excuse me for a second here. I mean, it even happened a few times with rabbis. I said, no, that's not exactly what it says. And they go, oh, really? Let me just show you over here. Oh, okay. Because you see, they just sort of knew the overview of the story. But what we started to realize in making the film was that the details were what was very important. The detail was what we started to look at. And then I started to go back. If you go back to the very beginning of this testimony that there is of the story of the Bible, what happens in the Garden of Eden is that there is this narrative that Adam and Eve are there, and there's this tree. They're not supposed to eat of it, right? And this is the beginning of what they call the fall. And this serpent comes along. And what does the serpent say in the very beginning? Did God really say you're not supposed to eat of this fruit? So what I saw, that the very first part of this whole narrative starts out with questioning the truth of God's Word. I go, wow, that is very interesting from many ways to look at it. So we know that from the very beginning, the very introduction of this story is that. And I think that in the book of Revelation, it says, don't add anything. In the book of Revelation, I think John writes, don't add anything to this. If you do, you're in trouble. So from the beginning, it's about the Word. And then at the end, it's about don't add anything to it. Now, another interesting thing I noticed was that when Jesus is present, Yeshua, as you would say, the first time Satan meets him, what does he do? He questions, he challenges the meaning of God's Word. And I go, well, there it is again, this challenging of this Word. And then I noticed that there is a verse that says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And that's in John, I believe. And so I started to see there's a connection here, that there's this constant conflict between, well, what does it say and what does it mean? And did it really happen? And is it a myth? And we're asking, David's book is Exodus, myth or history? Myth or history? And what we're seeing is, remember that verse I shared with you early on? It said, don't forget. Don't forget that I did this with this mighty hand. I took you out. Never has it happened before that I'm going to take a nation out of another nation. And I didn't share this with too many people, but we think, well, this happened a long, long, long time ago. And you think, well, if a generation is 30 years, and I don't have any graphics for this, but it's about 3,500 years ago that this happened. And I'm going to round it up to 3,600 just for math purposes. But how many times does 30 years, and I have a son, and my son is 30. I have one son who's 30, and one's a little bit older, and he just had a son. And that's a generation. And my father and my grandfather. And so there's generations about every 30 years. I'm just going to say an average of. Do you know that it's only 120 generations back to the Exodus? If you flew here on a plane, the plane can hold more people than that, probably up to 240, depending on how big the plane is. So half the plane would be filled, and you'd all the way back in time to the Exodus. It's not really that long ago when you think about it. And so I was looking at that and realizing that what I was involved with, so as a filmmaker, you're saying, well, how am I going to make this film? How do I tell this story? And for me, that was one of the most difficult challenges, because I remember people saying, well, they said a lot of things, but I was kind of like the loser guy, because I couldn't finish this film. I didn't even know how to get it going. All I knew, I was filming and filming and filming. And in the very beginning, when we went in 2002, we went to Egypt, I filmed lots of material, but I didn't exactly know how we were going to use it. But I just kept filming. And then we had a sense that we should go and investigate more, and we went into other parts of the Middle East. And then later on, we went to Israel, because I realized that this was a story about the nation of Israel. And some people, if you see in the film, I have one of the interviews with Benjamin Netanyahu. And people say, well, how in the world did you get that interview? And that's a good question. And as we went, we had this very strong impression that we couldn't finish the film that we had. and that we needed to go to Israel. And so we contacted a woman in Israel who was an Israeli producer. And she says, I don't know what this is about, but I think it's really important for Israel. And she got behind it, and her family was well known. Her father was an Air Force commander. And so she had a connection with the government. And she just said, well, there's a very important film that's going to be made, and lots of people are going to see it, and that's what she sold. And she went to, I said, I want to see Benjamin Netanyahu and Shimon Peres, and I want to see ambassadors. I just said, I want to see everybody. And you know what? I got this, everybody. I mean, I was remarkable, but I was there for 3 weeks, and I managed to get appointments with all the key people. And I wasn't alone when I went to those. I mean, I felt that there was a presence that when I went to do those interviews that helped me. And I decided very early on, I realized that if I have a bunch of notes, and if I am staring down, I'm not really having an interview, you see. So I had to rehearse and understand the material. And when I went to the Knesset to interview Benjamin Netanyahu, because he's such a world prominent figure right now, especially with the conflicts that are going on, you know, you had to go, this was between the one prime minister term, and he was not a prime minister at the time, but he had then right after I filmed him, he became a prime minister again. And so I was kind of in that window of opportunity. And so I remember going down the plaza to the Knesset, you know, and then with our, you know, dragging the equipment along, and then going through this intensive security search. You know, you don't want to sneeze or do anything too fast when you're in those situations. You kind of got the security, the Secret Service of the Israelis there. Is it the Mossad or whatever, whoever it was that was protecting him. And so I remembered waiting for him. I got into his office, man, you've got like just 10 minutes to set up all the lights and get everything going. And my heart's starting to beat a little bit. You know, I'm getting excited. And I remember all of a sudden you could hear the scurry, he's coming. And he enters the room and he has this deep voice. I can't do his, you could probably do his voice better than I can do it, but he basically says, what's this all about? And I said, I'm making a film about the Exodus, and I believe a lot of people are going to see it. He goes, okay, let's do it. You know, and so he sits down, and I sit down, and I said, tell me the first time you heard the stories of the Bible. And he says, well, when my mother was nursing me. I didn't expect that, by the way. You know, every Jewish child hears the stories of the Bible. And I said, tell me about Joseph. And he said, Joseph, one of my favorite characters in the Bible. And as you listen to him speak, and you listen to, because his father was a scholar and taught at the university, and you start to realize there's a presence and an aura about certain people, and I felt that with Benjamin Netanyahu and also with Shimon Peres. These men were leaders. You could tell there was something about them that made them great. And then I remember what ended up happening. I was only supposed to talk with him for 10 minutes. And what ended up happening was that someone, I had spent several days reading his biography, and he had talked about his grandfather, Nathan. And I believe they lived in Poland. And his grandfather was a young yeshiva, was at a yeshiva? Yeah, yeshiva student. And actually more like probably a teenager, and his little brother, and they were near a railroad station, and a bunch of tough, you know, I know a gang of other boys saw them, and they knew that they were going to beat him up and really hurt him. And he told his younger brother to run, and he would stay there and fight them, or at least be the bait while the younger brother got away. And as they knocked him into unconsciousness and kicked him, he swore that he would, if he lived through this, that he would find a way to go to Israel. And so when he's talked about when he mentioned my grandfather, he's telling about his grandfather teaching him the stories of the Bible. I said, Nathan? And that was his grandfather's name. And he said, yes. And once I said Nathan, Benjamin Netanyahu and I were on another level. And my 10-minute interview went to 50 minutes. And what ended up happening was that we talked, and I asked him questions. I asked him questions about Moses and the Exodus, and I asked him about the covenant that God had made with the Jewish people, and I asked him about the diaspora and about the return, and I asked him a variety of different things. And it's wine in the cellar right now. It's an amazing interview that we have that we're waiting for the next films to come out. But and the same thing with Shimon Peres. When I went into his office and was able to meet with him and talk with him, there was the interviews were amazing, and what he said and what he shared, and we were at a whole nother level. And that was about a 50-minute interview. And I realized that I had been given a privilege that many people don't have. I mean, here I am. I'm really just a nobody guy. I was talking to you about, being raised in this single-parent home, and I didn't care about school when I was growing up because, the fact that my family was torn apart and I was just, without a dad. I mean, at the end of school, I used to take my books and throw it in the locker, and I didn't feel like too smart of a guy because I didn't care. It wasn't until the 11th grade when a teacher said to me, "Mr. Mahoney." That was a very good answer. And I thought, maybe I could understand this. It was in a history class, and maybe I could understand this. I started reading history and learning more about it. And here I am sitting with the Prime Minister of Israel and the President of Israel on this film. And I think that there's a lot of us like me that kind of feel like, you don't get it or you don't fit in or whatever. And I think the thing that I would like to say is that if we go back to that verse that my wife told me about, Ephesians 2:10, that from the beginning of time, there are things that we're called to do. That even though I had a rough start, lots of people have rough starts in their life, and you just have to move past it. And I started to realize that I was a thinker, and I did have ideas, and I did have questions, and I was able to construct things. And I took that journey of my life, and that led me and helped me to get to the point where there I was in Israel, talking to the Prime Minister of that nation, one of the key people that's in the world of politics today, and asking questions about the Bible and the historical credibility of the Bible. Because we know that there's so many people that have paid a price, right? They have paid dearly if these stories. And so the question is why would you die for a fairy tale? And why would people kill you for a fairy tale? And so the question about are these stories true or not is a very important question because it impacts everything. If these events didn't happen, then we might as well just eat, drink, and be merry for tomorrow we die, right? I mean, that's kind of the idea behind it. And that's kind of what the rest of the world thinks. And that's the course that they're on. And so I thought that there has to be more to this. There's something that's going on here, and I wanted to find out about it. And so in a way, as a filmmaker, I also knew that when I would go there, I wanted to hear why you don't believe. Because I think it's very important for me to understand. If you don't understand or you don't think there's any evidence for this, I want to know. Tell me what your reasons are. Tell me what your reasons are that you believe in this area and this area. And I think that what I started to see in this Bible was that it was good for you to look and question what people were saying. Because if you don't understand the original, you won't understand counterfeit, right? And so I had to basically start to say that, because I think there's a sense of it in culture today, is that, oh, I don't know anything about that. I just do whatever they tell me, you know? And that's dangerous because there's a lot of times people tell you stuff that's just, and you're basically saying to yourself, I'm not smart enough to understand this, and so somebody else who's smarter should just figure it out. And I think that what I would say to the audience and to you is that I don't think that's the right idea. I think that we've got to be thinking people, thinking men and thinking women, to basically look at these ideas, and just as we've talked about before, you know, with your pharmaceutical questions that are out there, you know, just because you think someone's smarter than you, if what they're giving you is not healthy, then you better pay attention and take responsibility for what you're ingesting. Whether you're ingesting things into your body or into your mind. So I think that's the common thread here, is that you've got to be careful what you put in your mind, and you can be good at trying to make those critical decisions. And that, as a filmmaker, then was what I started to realize, because I started to then film viewpoints without having to worry too much about being threatened by them, because the standard I was looking at was the Bible. So what does the Bible say, and how does that match up with what we're seeing here? And I had to have a certain level of faith that in time I would be able to sort it out. That was sort of the question. And the challenge that I had was, would I offend people? I'm from Minnesota. Have you ever heard of Minnesota nice? The Scandinavians up there, well, I'm an Irish Scandinavian. So I've got a little bit of the fight in me and a little bit of the sweetness in me. But well, you've been to Minnesota, you understand that. But so anyway, so that's part of what was going on in my life as a filmmaker. I was trying to understand, how do I make a film that's this complex? And part of it had to do with my own personal journey. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to take the audience on my own journey. That's what I need to do. And I need to tell you a little bit about where I'm coming from. I'm a guy. I'm a guy who has questions, and I'm going to take other people along with me, and I'm going to ask those questions, and I'm going to make it so that you understand every word. You understand the word, and you understand where things are going to be. That's why we made the film very visual with the wall of time. And we're going to go talk to people, because this audience isn't just for believers. This is for people who don't believe, or people that are on the outside. I'm going to try to say, okay, everybody, let's come along and ask this question, and ask and understand these questions. And so that was the approach then. That's the reason why I had to allow more people into this film and onto this journey. And so I think that gives you a little bit of context, and it was challenging. I mean, I have to tell you something. In the middle of this, I thought, I'm going bankrupt. I mean, I'm not going to ever get this thing finished, and it was tragic. And I got depressed. I bought a camping trailer, and was so depressed. I went camping. One year, I camped for 90 days. And just watched, campfires. I didn't do it all in a row, by the way. I was just, weekends whenever I could, to try to just emotionally recover from the challenge of all the trips, multiple trips to Europe, and to funding all this and trying to get by, making commercials, and then trying to go film and edit. And it seemed like we were getting nowhere. But I knew that I couldn't quit. I had to keep trying to understand what this was. I kept saying, what in the world is this about? And I had a sense that this was about a theme. And the theme was remembrance and forewarning. Now, what that means, I'm still trying to understand it, but I think I get the remembrance. It goes back to, don't forget what God did by bringing these people out of Egypt. And when I go to New York or I go to other places and show this film, people are impacted in a great way, because I think they have not believed it, even though they think it's all right, that they've just never felt like they've been connected to it. So for whatever reason, for whatever time in history this information is important. And all I can say to you is that I'm going to continue to try to unfold it and take you on this journey as I meet more and more people. And I ask the questions, what does the Bible say about this? And then we're going to go look for that. What does the Bible say about this and about that? We're going to continue to unfold it. So that's the vision of what this is all about. And with that, I think it's time to bring David up, and he can expand a much deeper level. So.